The shimmering halls of the galactic Concord reflected Princess Alira's turmoil as she paced relentlessly. Her starlight gown rippled with every frustrated movement, its iridescent glow betraying the regal composure she tried so hard to maintain. Born into the illustrious royal lineage of Zilithia, Alira had spent her life preparing for treaties, alliances, and negotiations, but nothing had prepared her for this. Before her hovered a detailed hologram, its glowing blue text pulsating with quiet menace. The figure at its center was unmistakable, Captain Alexander Kane, the human selected as her betrothed to secure peace between their worlds. Alira's amber eyes narrowed as she studied the hardened features of the man described as ruthless, unyielding, and a master of war. His reputation preceded him, a warrior who commanded respect and fear across the stars. "They expect me to unite with this butcher?" she muttered, her melodic voice tinged with disdain. Voss, her aged Zitari advisor, stepped forward, his crystalline skin refracting light like a prism. "Princess, the Council believes this union to be our best chance at survival. Humanity's strength is unmatched, and Captain Kane is revered as one of their greatest leaders. His alliance could tip the balance in our favor against the Rift Syndicate." Alira shot him a sharp glare. "And at what cost? Sacrificing me to a barbarian for the sake of political convenience?" Voss sighed, his age-worn voice filled with quiet wisdom. "Your Highness, humanity may be formidable, but they are also unpredictable. Captain Kane's dossier reveals a man who values loyalty and honor above all else. Perhaps he is not the monster the stories suggest." The princess scoffed, but her heart wavered. She had heard whispers of humanity's ferocity, their unyielding determination to protect their own. It was said that they fought not for conquest but survival, and this captain had led them through some of their darkest battles. Yet the thought of being bound to a man she had never met, especially one with a reputation for destruction, was almost too much to bear. Her musings were interrupted by the arrival of a Zilithian envoy, whose deep bow carried a message of urgency. "Your Highness, the human delegation has arrived. They await your presence in the council chamber." The words sent a shiver through her. It was time. Alira steeled herself, drawing on the lessons her mother had drilled into her since childhood. Grace under pressure. Strength in adversity. With a nod to Voss, she walked through the gilded corridors toward her destiny. As the towering doors to the council chamber swung open, a hush fell over the gathered dignitaries. The humans stood apart, their stark uniforms a sharp contrast to the flowing, ethereal attire of the Zilithians. At their center stood Captain Kane, his presence commanding the room like a force of nature. Alira's breath hitched. The hologram had not done him justice. Kane's rugged features were framed by dark hair streaked with silver at the temples, a testament to battles fought and survived. His piercing blue eyes scanned the room with a predator's precision, assessing every threat, every opportunity. He was tall, his posture rigid, radiating an aura of control that made even the most confident Zilithians avert their gaze. Kane's eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, the world seemed to shrink around them. His expression was unreadable, neither hostile nor welcoming, simply calculating. "Princess Alira," he said, his voice a deep baritone that resonated through the chamber. He inclined his head in a gesture that could almost be interpreted as respect. "Captain Kane," she replied, her voice steady despite the storm raging within her. The council leader, an elder Zilithian with shimmering silver scales, began the formal proceedings. Speeches were made, promises exchanged, but Alira barely registered the words. Her focus remained on Kane, who stood silently, his gaze unwavering. When the ceremony concluded, the princess and the captain were escorted to a private chamber to converse without the weight of their entourages. The room was adorned with symbols of unity, but the tension was palpable. "You're not what I expected," Kane said, breaking the silence. Alira raised an elegant brow. "And what exactly did you expect, Captain? A docile royal eager to please?" His lips twitched, almost forming a smirk. "Hardly. I've read enough to know you're anything but docile. Your reputation for diplomacy and strategy precedes you." She tilted her head, studying him. Flattery from a man known for leveling entire fleets? I'm surprised. Kane leaned forward, his gaze intense. Let's not mince words, Princess. This isn't about flattery or love. This is a transaction, a necessity for the survival of both our people. But that doesn't mean it has to be hostile. Alira's guard faltered for a fraction of a second. There was no malice in his words, only brutal honesty. And what do you propose, Captain? That we pretend to enjoy this arrangement? Kane's eyes softened slightly, a hint of something human beneath the warrior's exterior. No. I propose we work together. If this union is meant to unite our people, let's start by understanding each other. Alira blinked, momentarily disarmed. She had expected arrogance, perhaps even disdain. Instead, she found pragmatism, a willingness to meet her halfway. Very well, Captain Kane, she said, her tone measured. Let us begin with understanding. As they spoke, the initial tension began to ease, replaced by a tentative curiosity. Kane shared stories of humanity's struggles, their resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. Alira, in turn, spoke of her people's traditions, their intricate politics, and the burden of leadership. By the time their meeting ended, the princess found herself reevaluating her assumptions. Kane was not the savage brute she had imagined. He was a man forged by hardship, tempered by experience, and driven by duty, a reflection, perhaps, of her own struggles. As they parted ways for the evening, Alira couldn't shake the feeling that this union, unlikely as it seemed, might hold the key to something greater than either of them could have anticipated. The stars outside the Zilithian royal cruiser gleamed like shards of diamond against an endless sea of darkness. Within the grand vessel, Princess Alira's thoughts churned relentlessly. Her initial meeting with Captain Alexander Kane had left her more conflicted than ever. He wasn't the brute she had expected, nor the diplomat she had hoped for. He was something else entirely, a paradox of ferocity and restraint. As the cruiser glided toward a neutral planet for the next stage of their alliance talks, Alira stared out of her private quarters, her reflection on the glass merging with the stars beyond. A soft chime interrupted her reverie. "Enter," she said, turning to see Voss stepping inside. "Your Highness," he began, his crystalline form catching the dim light. "We've intercepted troubling communications. The Rift Syndicate is aware of our alliance with humanity, and they are not pleased." Alira's heart sank. The Rift Syndicate was a coalition of mercenary clans and rogue factions that thrived on chaos. Their reach was vast, their methods brutal. "Do they plan to intervene?" Voss hesitated, then nodded. "Our intelligence suggests they aim to disrupt the talks. They may strike at the summit itself." The summit was to be held on a neutral planet, the perfect stage for political theatrics and potential treachery. Alira's mind raced. "We must inform Captain Kane. He needs to know what we're up against." Moments later, she stood before a secure communication terminal, Kane's face appearing on the holographic display. His sharp features were illuminated by the cold blue glow of the screen. "Princess," he greeted, his tone neutral. "To what do I owe this unexpected call?" "We have a problem," Alira said, wasting no time. "The Rift Syndicate knows about the summit. They may attempt to sabotage the proceedings." Kane's expression hardened. "Do you have specifics?" "Not yet, but their reputation speaks for itself. We must prepare for the worst." Kane leaned back slightly, his calculating gaze meeting hers. "Agreed. My team and I will double security protocols. If they come, they won't find us unprepared." For the first time, Alira felt a flicker of relief. Kane's confidence wasn't arrogance, it was assurance born of experience. The summit's location was an unassuming planet covered in sprawling green plains and crystalline lakes. It was meant to symbolize neutrality and harmony, but to Alira, it felt like a trap waiting to be sprung. As their ships descended, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into the jaws of danger. The summit began with the expected fanfare. Delegates from both species exchanged pleasantries, their words laced with veiled threats and forced smiles. Alira, seated beside Kane at the central table, found herself growing more impressed by his ability to navigate the tense atmosphere. He spoke with a calm authority that commanded respect, deflecting verbal barbs with ease. But the uneasy peace didn't last. Halfway through the negotiations, an unnatural stillness fell over the chamber. Alira's instincts screamed a warning just as the sound of an explosion tore through the air. The walls trembled, and chaos erupted. Guards scrambled to secure the delegates as masked figures stormed the chamber, weapons blazing. The Rift Syndicate had arrived. Alira's heart pounded as she ducked behind the central table, her gown catching on the ornate chair. Kane was already in motion, barking orders into a communication device and taking down one of the attackers with a precision shot from his sidearm. "Stay down!" he yelled, his voice cutting through the din. Alira wasn't one to cower, but the sheer intensity of the assault left her momentarily frozen. She watched as Kane moved with lethal efficiency, his movements precise and deliberate. "You!" he called to her, his voice sharp. "Can you handle a weapon?" "Yes," she replied without hesitation, her training in palace defense suddenly proving invaluable. Kane tossed her a compact blaster, and she caught it deftly, her fingers instinctively finding the trigger. Rising from her cover, she fired at an advancing syndicate mercenary, the shot landing true. "Not bad," Kane said with a faint smirk as he covered her flank. The two of them worked in tandem, their actions synchronized despite having never fought together before. Alira found herself surprised at how seamlessly they complemented each other. Kane's brutal efficiency was balanced by her strategic precision. The tide began to turn as Kane's reinforcements arrived, human soldiers flooding the chamber with disciplined ferocity. The Syndicate, realizing they were outmatched, began to retreat, but not before detonating a secondary charge that collapsed part of the chamber's roof. As the dust settled, Alira found herself pinned under a fallen beam. Pain shot through her arm as she struggled to free herself. "Hold still," Kane said, appearing at her side. With a grunt, he lifted the beam enough for her to crawl out. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice softer now. "Just bruised," she replied, wincing as she stood. "What about the others?" "We secured most of the delegates," Kane said, his tone grim. "But the Syndicate will be back. This was just a warning shot." Alira's chest tightened. The Rift Syndicate's reach was far greater than she had anticipated. If they were willing to go to such lengths to disrupt the Alliance, what other horrors might they unleash? Kane's gaze met hers, his eyes filled with determination. "We'll deal with them. Together." Alira nodded, her fear tempered by resolve. For the first time, she saw Kane not as a potential adversary but as a true partner. The alliance they were forging wasn't just between their species, it was between them. As they regrouped, Alira couldn't help but reflect on how quickly the fragile truce had turned into a battlefield. The Rift Syndicate had shown their hand, but they had also underestimated their opponents. "They think they can intimidate us," she said quietly to Kane as they prepared for the next move. "But they've just given us the reason we needed to stand united." Kane's lips curved into a grim smile. "Then let's show them what happens when they push too far." The princess and the captain stood side by side, their shared resolve burning brighter than ever. The Rift Syndicate had started this fight, but Alira knew in her heart that she and Kane would be the ones to finish it. The calm after the attack was an illusion, a fragile moment of respite that only heightened the tension. The summit chamber had been cleared, and the injured were receiving treatment aboard the Zilithian and human ships. Alira stood on the bridge of her cruiser, overlooking the planet below. The Rift Syndicate had retreated, but the sense of danger hung heavy in the air. Kane's voice broke her thoughts. "We've traced their retreat to a nearby system. If we act fast, we can intercept them before they regroup." "Are you proposing we strike now?" Alira asked, turning to face him. "Yes," he replied without hesitation. "They'll come for us again, but this time, we take the fight to them. We need to end this before it escalates further." Alira hesitated. Offensive action was not her forte, diplomacy and strategy were her strengths. But Kane's determination was contagious, and she knew he was right. If they waited, the Syndicate would only grow bolder. "I'll mobilize our fleet," she said. But this operation will need precision. A misstep could cost us everything. Kane nodded. Then let's make sure we don't misstep. Within hours, the combined forces of humanity and the Zilithian Empire launched toward the Rift Syndicate's hidden base. The fleet moved with practiced coordination, a testament to the alliance they were forging. Alira found herself seated in the command chair of her flagship, the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. Kane's voice came through the comms. Scans indicate a heavily fortified asteroid belt surrounding their base. They've set up automated defenses and cloaked mines. Getting through won't be easy. We have advanced cloaking systems, Alira replied. If we deploy them strategically, we can maneuver through the belt unnoticed. I'll lead a strike team to disable their main defenses from within, Kane said. Once we've cleared the way, your fleet can engage. Alira frowned. You're putting yourself at significant risk. Risk is part of the job, Princess, Kane replied with a hint of humor. Besides, I'm not the type to sit back and watch. The plan was set into motion. Kane and his team boarded a sleek infiltration vessel, its cloaking systems engaged as it slipped through the asteroid belt. Alira monitored their progress from the bridge, her heart pounding with every update. Approaching the base, Kane's voice crackled through the comms. No signs we've been detected yet. The minutes stretched into an eternity as the strike team infiltrated the base. Alira could hear the tension in Kane's voice as he issued orders to his team, their movements swift and deliberate. We've reached the control room, he reported. Disabling the automated defenses now. Suddenly, alarms blared across the comms. They've spotted us, Kane shouted. We're under fire! Alira's stomach dropped. The sounds of gunfire and explosions filled the transmission. She gripped the armrests of her chair, helpless to intervene. Kane, report, she demanded, her voice sharper than she intended. We're pinned down, Kane replied, his breaths labored. But we've planted the charges. Just need a few more minutes. Reinforcements are on their way, Alira said, signaling her fleet to advance. Hold your position. The Zilithian and human fleets surged forward, their combined might cutting through the asteroid belt. The automated defenses, now partially disabled, posed less of a threat, but the Syndicate's ships were mobilizing to defend their base. As the battle raged, Alira's focus remained split between the fleet's maneuvers and Kane's precarious situation. We're clear! Kane's voice finally came through. Charges detonating in 3, 2. A deafening explosion echoed through the comms, and the Syndicate's base shuddered violently. The automated defenses went offline, leaving the fleet with a clear path to the enemy stronghold. Mission accomplished, Kane said, his tone triumphant. Good work, Alira replied, relief flooding her. Now get back here in one piece. Kane's team barely made it back to their vessel before the Syndicate's forces closed in. Alira's flagship provided covering fire as they escaped, the smaller ship docking safely aboard. As Kane stepped onto the bridge, his armor scorched and his expression grim, Alira felt an uncharacteristic surge of emotion. You're alive, she said, unable to hide her relief. Did you doubt me? He replied, a teasing glint in his eyes. Before she could respond, an officer interrupted. Your Highness, the Syndicate is retreating, but their flagship remains. It's heavily armed and targeting our fleet. Alira's gaze snapped to the tactical display. The Syndicate's flagship was a monstrous vessel, bristling with weapons and shields. It was clear they intended to go down fighting. Suggestions? Kane asked, his tone serious. We'll need to disable their shields before we can inflict significant damage, Alira said. But getting close enough will be dangerous. I've got an idea, Kane said. It's risky, but it might just work. What are you proposing? Use my team's infiltration vessel as a decoy. We'll draw their fire, creating an opening for your fleet to strike. That's suicide, Alira protested. Not if we time it right, Kane countered. We've done this before. Trust me. Alira hesitated, torn between her instincts and Kane's confidence. Finally, she nodded. Very well. But don't take unnecessary risks. Kane smiled faintly. Risks are my specialty. The plan was executed with precision. Kane's vessel darted toward the Syndicate's flagship, drawing its fire as the Zilithian and human fleets closed in. The decoy maneuver worked, exposing a vulnerability in the flagship's defenses. Fire everything we've got, Aelira ordered. The combined might of their fleets unleashed a devastating barrage, striking the flagship's core. The massive vessel shuddered and erupted in a blinding explosion, marking the end of the battle. As the debris settled, Aelira allowed herself a moment of relief. The Syndicate had been dealt a crippling blow, their threat diminished, at least for now. Kane returned to the bridge, his expression weary but triumphant. Looks like we did it. We did, Aelira agreed, meeting his gaze. Together. The princess and the captain stood side by side, their alliance forged not just in politics but in battle. They had faced the Syndicate's wrath and emerged victorious, their bond stronger than ever. But both knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and its challenges endless. Yet, for the first time, Aelira felt hope that together, they could overcome anything. The Syndicate's defeat left the galaxy stunned, its remnants scattering into the void like leaves on a restless wind. But the echoes of their terror would not vanish so easily, and neither would the consequences of the alliance forged to stop them. The Galactic Council convened hastily, attempting to spin the narrative of their inaction into one of calculated strategy. Meanwhile, aboard the Zilithian flagship, the aftermath of the battle began to weigh on Aelira and Kane in profoundly different ways. As Aelira stood in the observation chamber, gazing out at the stars, the enormity of what they had accomplished pressed down on her. She thought of the lives lost, the unity forged under duress, and the fragile alliances now teetering under the weight of post-conflict politics. Kane entered, his steps heavier than usual. His armor was scuffed, and the exhaustion etched into his face made him appear older, but his eyes still carried the determined fire that had defined him from the beginning. "You look like you're ready to tear into someone," he said, leaning against the wall beside her. "I'm wondering if we've truly won," Aelira replied, her voice soft. "The Syndicate is broken, but the galaxy feels no safer. The Council's priorities remain divided." Kane nodded. "That's politics. The Syndicate's remnants might still regroup, but what we've shown them, the strength of what we can achieve together, that'll stick. They'll think twice before they try something like this again." Aelira turned to him, her expression troubled. "And what of us, Kane? The humans, the Zilithians? What happens now? Do we return to our respective worlds, our uneasy alliance forgotten as quickly as it was formed?" Kane crossed his arms, considering her words. "We've proven something today. That humanity and the Zilithians can stand shoulder to shoulder when it matters. That counts for a lot. But yeah, keeping it going won't be easy. The Council's full of old grudges and paranoia. Trust is a hard sell in a galaxy like ours." Before Aelira could respond, a sharp chime interrupted them. A hologram materialized, displaying the image of High Chancellor Arivian, a Zilithian elder statesman whose influence had been pivotal in securing the alliance. "Princess Aelira," Arivian began, his voice measured. "The Council demands an audience. They wish to address the repercussions of today's events." Aelira sighed. "The Council wishes to dissect our every move and debate endlessly over semantics while the galaxy remains on edge." Kane smirked. "Sounds like my kind of party." "Captain Kane," Arivian acknowledged with a curt nod. "Your presence is also requested. The Council is eager to hear the perspective of humanity's chosen representative." "Oh, I'm sure they are," Kane replied, his tone laced with sarcasm. As the hologram flickered out, Aelira turned to Kane. "I hope you're ready for the barrage of questions and thinly veiled accusations. Diplomacy isn't my strong suit," Kane admitted, "but I've gotten pretty good at not punching politicians. Mostly." The council chamber was as imposing as ever, its towering walls lined with symbols of every member species. Representatives from across the galaxy filled the seats, their expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. Aelira stepped forward, her regal bearing commanding attention. Kane followed, his every movement a calculated blend of defiance and restraint. "Princess Aelira, Captain Kane," Chancellor Arivian began, his voice resonating through the chamber. "Today's events have altered the balance of power in the galaxy. The Council wishes to understand the implications of your actions." Aelira's gaze swept over the assembly. "The implications are clear. The Syndicate underestimated the power of unity. They sought to divide us, to exploit our differences, but they failed. Today, we proved that even the most fractured alliances can achieve greatness when faced with a common enemy." Murmurs rippled through the chamber, some in agreement, others in dissent. Kane stepped forward. "What we prove," he said, his voice cutting through the noise, "is that action beats hesitation every time. While you debated, people died. Worlds burned. The Syndicate thrived on your inaction. If humanity and the Zilithians hadn't stepped up, we'd all be picking up the pieces of a galaxy they'd already torn apart." The murmurs grew louder, some representatives bristling at Kane's bluntness. Chancellor Arivian raised a hand for silence. "Your words, while bold, highlight the urgency of the moment. The Council must decide how to proceed. Will this alliance endure, or was it merely a temporary necessity?" Before Aelira could respond, a Zilithian representative stood. "The question is not whether this alliance can endure, but whether it should. Humanity's methods are unorthodox. Their unpredictability poses a risk to stability." Kane smirked. "Unpredictable? Maybe. But when the chips are down, we get the job done. Stability doesn't mean much if you're not around to enjoy it." Aelira placed a hand on Kane's arm, a subtle gesture to temper his approach. "What humanity offers is not a threat, but a strength. Their resilience, their creativity, they bring something the galaxy sorely lacks. And as for the Zilithians, our wisdom and strategy have complemented their boldness. Together, we are stronger than we ever were apart." The chamber fell silent, the weight of her words settling over the assembly. After what felt like an eternity, Chancellor Arivian spoke. "The Council will deliberate on this matter. Until then, the alliance between humanity and the Zilithians shall remain in effect. Let today's victory serve as a testament to what can be achieved through unity." As the session adjourned, Aelira and Kane left the chamber, the weight of the galaxy's future still pressing heavily upon them. Back aboard the flagship, Aelira found herself once again gazing out at the stars. Kane joined her, his presence a comforting constant amidst the uncertainty. "You think they'll come around?" Kane asked. "Perhaps," Aelira replied. "But change is slow, and the galaxy is stubborn. Still, we've planted a seed today. It's up to us to nurture it." Kane nodded. "Well, if anyone can do it, it's you." Aelira turned to him, a small smile playing on her lips. "And you, Captain? Together, we've accomplished what many thought impossible." The two stood in silence, the vastness of space stretching out before them. The battle was over, but their journey had only just begun. With the future uncertain and challenges looming, one thing was clear: they would face it together.